If cleanliness is next to godliness, as the founder of Methodism, John Wesley, supposedly said in 1791, then many people throughout history have been godless heathens. There have been some pretty horrible hygiene practices over the years, from wigs, whose smell is almost as dangerous as their flammability, to people throwing feces out of windows at their enemies, to famous sculptors who avoided showers to the point where their clothes fused to their skin. These are the filthiest hygiene practices throughout history. Thin up top. For a lot of men, getting thin up top can probably be a horrible experience. Nowadays, there are things like hair transplants or pills that could or couldn't work. There's still no cure for baldness, and back in the day, people came up with some pretty bizarre concoctions to try to maintain their hairlines. One of those things was lathering bird poop and then putting it on your scalp. The potassium in chicken or pigeon dung was once thought to regrow hair, although it was probably more a placebo than anything else. There's been no evidence that doing it helped in any way. One of those people was the ancient Greek physician Hippocrates. Realized that he was going bald, he whipped up a potion of horseradish, cumin, anti, beetroot, and pigeon dung and slathered it all over his scalp. The result? Well, based on sculptures and drawings of the legendary physician, it didn't seem to work. Before Hippocrates, the Egyptians tried to remedy male pattern baldness in their own ways. Back in 1500 BC, it's thought that they prayed to the sun god Ra before gulping down a drink of onion, honey, alabaster, red lead, and iron. Still, their hair grew thinner. Then they tried rubbing hippopotamus fat on their scalp. Did not work. Lion fat? Nope. If all else fails, maybe get a wig. This is exactly what Louis XIV did in the 1600s. He also tried a hair loss remedy that consisted of pigeon droppings. But when that didn't work, he covered up his bald head with elaborate wigs that were becoming all the rage in France at the time. The Dirty Scotsman. King James VI of Scotland, who would later be known as King James I of England after ascending to the English throne in 1603, had a pretty good nickname. He was called the wisest fool in Christendom. At once a compliment and an insult, King James was a tough guy to pin down. On the one hand, he was a champion of art and culture. He was an intellectual who wrote books and treatises. He was also an eccentric who wore a hat 24 hours a day and didn't really know how to govern a country. James was highly educated, particularly in philosophy and theology. He wrote quite a few books, including Demonology, a light read about how witches exist, how they make pacts with the devil, and how to detect and catch them. It was a good manual for all the paranoid witch trials that were going on at the time in the UK. He also commissioned his own version of the Bible, the King James Version, one of the first English translations and one that would become hugely popular for Christians. But despite his intellectual achievements, King James was known for some unusual and, by modern standards, pretty unhygienic habits. He hated bathing. He thought water was harmful to your health and, well, just wouldn't do it. This, of course, didn't make him the most pleasant person to be around, smell-wise. He also would go months without changing his clothes, and it said he even slept on them. Pajamas? I don't need no stinking pajamas. Connected to the clothes thing, it's also said that King James had a weird attachment to his hat. He wore the same hat all the time, never taking it off, even when he was eating, or sleeping, or attending formal events. He wore it so often that the hat apparently deteriorated to the point of falling apart. Mumia. A mistranslation of an Arabic word led to the European practice of grinding up mummies and even certain parts of just normal deceased people and using them as medicine. Unhygienic? Well, not in a conventional sense, but eating the remains of embalmed people cannot be the cleanest practice in the history of Homo sapiens. The craze got so intense that hangmen were literally selling body parts of deceased criminals to apothecaries and physicians. It all started around the 11th or 12th century, when contact between Europe and the Arab world began to increase. European scholars started translating Arabic texts and learning about all the incredible advances they'd been making in mathematics and astronomy and medicine. In Persia, they had a substance called mumia that seeped out of the black rocks of a single sacred mountain. In the region, mum meant wax, and this wax was renowned for its healing properties. But European scholars started confusing the Persian mumia with Egyptian mummies and the embalming process, and a belief popped up that it was medicinally beneficial to consume the dusty remains of old bones. By the time the Renaissance came around, Egyptian mummies were so popular that people were counterfeiting them to make a couple of bucks. Big bucks, actually. Mummy remains were at a premium. By the late 1800s, the UK hit peak Egyptmania. In a lot of circles, mummies were more valuable than any of the gold or jewels looted from Egyptian tombs. If you couldn't get your hands on a genuine mummy, you could always go dig up a body or two from your local graveyard and turn it into one. Body snatching was illegal, but business was booming. People were taking the cadavers of freshly ended criminals, for example, covering them in salt, drying them in ovens, and then grinding them up to sell as medicine. Or jerky. Mumia was used for all kinds of ailments. Have a headache? Try some mumia. Want to prevent a heart attack? A scoop of mumia a day keeps the Grim Reaper away. The use of mumia was based on the tradition of sympathetic magic, where the principle of like cures like was applied to medical treatments. The belief was that by consuming or applying parts of a deceased person, you could transfer the vitality and life force of the deceased to the living, potentially curing all kinds of things. Smelly, flaming wigs. In the 18th century, wigs were a must-have fashion accessory for both men and women alike in France. They were more than just a fashion statement, though. In an era where lice ran rampant, it was easier to clean a wig than your own hair. But buyer beware, they tended to burst into flames and smell like a dead animal. The towering, elaborate wigs were called perukes. They were made out of human or animal hair and then lathered up with animal fat like lard or tallow to make it easy for wig wearers to fashion them into all the most elaborate styles at the time and wow their friends and families at parties and whatnot. Now, one drawback of lathering up your wig with animal fat was that it didn't smell particularly nice, especially if the fat was left there for days or weeks. Imagine wearing your clownishly put-together wig while schmoozing at an event out in someone's garden one hot summer day when your head starts to heat up to the point where all the lard is sizzling, like you're ready to fry some bacon. It's a little far-fetched, but not too far off of what it might have actually been like. Those wigs could smell. The other drawback of wearing one of these wigs was that they had the unfortunate tendency to catch fire. The animal fat they were coated with made them highly flammable. The combination of wigs, candles, and open flames in the 18th century French court and society created what can be kindly described as a significant fire hazard, and unkindly described as a very dumb idea. There are more than a few stories of wigs catching fire during balls and other social events. Imagine, then, your already foul-smelling wig caught fire, wafting the smell of rancid fat and burnt hair into the noses of all the other guests, maybe even some girls you were trying to get. Now that, my friend, would be embarrassing. One such incident happened at the French court of Louis XIV. The king himself narrowly escaped a wig-related fire during a ballet performance when a dancer's wig burst into flames thanks to brushing up against a nearby candle. The performance nearly literally burnt down the house. Michelangelo's grime. For a guy who made some of the most beautiful artwork in history, Michelangelo was surprisingly disgusting. The creator of the statue of David and the frescoes that lined the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel was a guy who notoriously hated bathing or changing his clothes at all, to the point where some say his skin came off once he tried to finally take off his shoes. Whew. Michelangelo's aversion to bathing might have been inherited. It's said that his father often told him to never wash himself and instead allow yourself to be rubbed. Not sure if that was the best fatherly advice ever given. Michelangelo heeded the words of his father, though. He really never bathed. It got so bad that people were paying him to wear perfume instead of paying him to make art. Okay, that's not true, but maybe not that inaccurate. Michelangelo also had the tendency to sleep in his clothes, including the boots he wore. According to biographer Ascanio Condivi, he would wear his boots for so long that the skin of his feet peeled off like a snake's when he finally got around to taking them off. But maybe his father was right, though. Michelangelo lived to the ripe old age of 88, though it's uncertain if his horrible hygiene had anything to do with his longevity. Urine trouble. If you were stranded in the desert, how long would it take before you resorted to drinking your own pee to survive? For people in a lot of cultures throughout history, the answer would be, why would I have to be stranded in a desert? I drink that stuff every morning before I go to work. Urine has had some pretty surprising uses over the years, from a teeth whitener to eye drops to skincare treatments. And yeah, people drank it too, and not because they were stranded in the desert. The Romans loved urine. They used it as a teeth whitener. We don't really know just how pearly white their pearly whites were, but they found the ammonia content of pee had a mild bleaching property that helped them achieve a smile fit for the gods. Way before Listerine was invented, The ancient Romans were rinsing their mouths with urine or using it as a mouthwash in an attempt to whiten their teeth and maintain oral hygiene. Imagine for a moment, swishing urine around in your mouth and then spitting it out. Urine was so popular in ancient Rome that Emperor Vespasian started taxing it. Aside from its dubious teeth-whitening properties, urine was also used in agriculture. The nitrogen contained in the ammonia from urine was pretty helpful in upping crop yields. More than that, even the taxes Vespasian collected from the urine tax helped him start construction of the Colosseum. So you can kind of thank well-hydrated Romans for one of the world's most famous historical landmarks. Urine was used for other things too. In Indian Ayurvedic medicine, it's been used as eye drops. More recently, a British guy named John W. Armstrong published a book in 1944 called The Water of Life, a treatise on urine therapy, where he claimed drinking urine was beneficial for your health. He even cited the Bible as proof, interpreting a proverb that went, "Drink waters out of thine own cistern and running waters of thine own well," as advice that drinking your own pee is good for you. The practice caught on with particular gusto in India, where it was connected to the different Ayurvedic and traditional medicines, despite flimsy proof that it was ever actually a traditional practice. Thanks for watching. What's the least hygienic cultural practice that you know about? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Nutty History.